8 spine-chilling trucker horror encounters revealed. The highway was empty, but I wasn't alone. The stars flickered above like cold, distant eyes, and as Karen steered her rig onto the winding stretch of Route 66, an unsettling chill crept into her bones. She had driven these roads for years, but tonight, the highway felt different, alive in ways that made her heart race with fear. Just a few hours from home, her daughter Lily's 10th birthday party loomed, but anxiety coiled tighter in her chest with each mile that slipped away. Before hitting the road, a frantic call from her neighbor snaked through her mind, warning her about bizarre figures lurking near her home. "Just shadows," she muttered, shaking off the sense of dread. But as the tires hummed against the asphalt, the radio crackled to life. A morbid message emerged from the static, sending an icy shiver down her spine. "You're not alone." Karen glanced in the rearview mirror. The darkness seemed to pulse, shadows flickering just beyond her field of view. She cursed herself for being paranoid. Yet, the emptiness felt suffocating, creeping into her thoughts with gruesome imagery. She gripped the wheel tighter, focusing on the faint glow of the old signs dotting the landscape. Each flicker felt like a warning. The world outside grew quieter, more sinister with every passing moment. Suddenly, a violent jolt rocked her truck. "No, no, no," she cried as the engine sputtered, coughing dryly before dying in a puff of billowing smoke. Panic surged through her veins as she maneuvered to the shoulder of the road. But just as despair began to set in, 2 headlights pierced the darkness behind her. Relief surged through her. A patrol car was pulling up. The officer stepped out, silhouetted against the glaring beams. "Need help?" His voice was smooth as silk, but something in her gut squirmed against it. He leaned closer, face obscured by shadow. The fragile sense of safety twisted into dread as a wave of instinct urged her to flee. Something was wrong as she recounted her troubles. Her heart thudded like a drum in the stillness that enveloped them. The radio crackled again, and ghostly whispers reverberated in her ears. "Not safe. Danger is near." Sweat pooled in her palms. She fought to stay calm. The stories of hidden dangers from her small town echoed in her mind, the familiar faces that turned out to be anything but trustworthy. "Are you sure you're okay?" the officer asked, moving closer, invading her space. Panic spilled over. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, each whisper from the radio amplifying the sense of doom inching ever closer. Karen's breath quickened. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The officer's gaze darkened as he moved once more. Shadows danced around Karen's truck, ominous and alive. Her instincts screamed at her to get away, but the engine laid cold and silent, a metallic tomb holding her captive. She glanced back at the highway. No cars in sight, just desolation. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, though the tightening knot in her stomach belied her words. Would she be able to escape this nightmare before it consumed her whole? As the officer took another step forward, a chill deeper than the night settled in her bones. Would she discover the truth, or would she become a story told by firelight? Another whisper on this haunted road? Karen's heart hammered as if trying to break free from her chest. The officer's shadow loomed larger, and the whispers invaded her mind like shards of ice. "What's wrong?" she managed to stammer, her voice shaking. "Just helping a driver in need," he replied smoothly, but his tone dripped with something sinister. His eyes glinted in the darkness, like lanterns on a foggy night, drawing her deeper into a trap. Instinct told her to fight for her life, for Lily waiting at home, for the birthday cake that had better still be in the fridge. The radio buzzed again, unsettling static morphing into horrifying laughter that echoed in the confined space of the truck. She clamped her hands over her ears, wishing it would stop, wishing for the heavy silence of the empty road to return. "Shut up," She hissed at the radio, desperation tightening around her throat. The officer stepped closer, invading her space with an aura that froze her insides. "Help should come from those you trust," he said. Was he mocking her? "Are you sure you want to stay here?" He leaned in so close she could smell the stale odor of his breath, sickly sweet and tainted with something decaying. Without replying, Karen knew what she must do. She shifted her foot to the gas pedal, fingers trembling at the ignition switch. She would start the engine and speed away. But even now, the vehicle felt like a tomb, refusing to budge. "Come on." She slammed her palm against the dashboard, panic clawing at her sanity. "I can help you," the officer whispered, too calm, too eager. He extended a hand, a dark figure against the glaring headlights of his car. "Just let me in. Let me steer you from danger." A noise erupted from the woods behind him, branches snapping. A low growl, inhuman and angry. The officer's demeanor faltered for the briefest of moments, a flicker of fear crossing his face. What was hidden in those woods? What lurked just beyond the reach of the sodium lights? Karen, the radio called, her name a broken whisper that breathed air into her suffocating fears. "You're not alone," with a surge of adrenaline. She ripped the door open and darted out into the night, leaving the officer's shocked expression behind her. The asphalt felt cold against her feet as she sprinted toward the tree line, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. She could hear him yell behind her, but she didn't look back. Her instincts were alive, screaming at her to flee. She plunged into the darkness, twigs snapping underfoot, the air thick with the sense of pine and mildew. Her breath came in sharp gasps. Every shadow became a threat, every sound a warning. The laughter still echoed from the radio, mixing with the rustling leaves, a symphony of chaos wrapping around her. Karen pushed deeper into the woods, dodging branches that whipped against her skin. Something primal within her guided her steps, a sense of urgency that mingled with pure terror. In the distance, faint lights shimmered, cabin lights, or something worse hiding in those shadows. Before she could reach them, a loud crash erupted from somewhere behind, followed by the furious growl that sent her heart racing anew. The officer was no longer chasing. Something else was, something far more terrifying. A weighty silence fell over the woods, thick as fog, making her skin crawl. Just a little further, she whispered to herself, ignoring the piercing gaze that seemed to bore into her back. Would she escape, or would she find herself in an even darker place? As she drew closer to the light, hope flickered, then dimmed like a candle about to be extinguished. Would this lead her to safety or straight into the jaws of a nightmare? The devil was waiting in the dark, and this time, the officer's voice broke through the silence, carrying an ominous promise. "You can't hide forever." The woods closed in around her as she raced toward the flickering light, her heart slamming against her ribs. Every breath felt labored, each step heavier, almost as if the shadows were reaching out to drag her back. The distant crash still echoed, a reminder that she wasn't alone, not just with the officer's chilling whisper or the terrible growls. As she pushed through the underbrush, branches clawed at her arms, but she hardly noticed. Her mind tunneled down, focusing only on the glow ahead, a beacon of hope or a trap laid by her predator. The adrenaline pulsed through her, a raw, burning energy. The laughter from the radio twisted like a blade in her thoughts. "You're not alone," it repeated, turning familiar comfort into spine-chilling dread. Reaching a clearing, Karen stumbled into the light's embrace. It was a cabin, modest yet inviting, smoke curling from the chimney like fingers beckoning her closer. Joy surged through her veins, a flicker of safety mixed with haunted suspicion. This cabin didn't belong here, not amidst the desolation of the woods so thick they seemed to breathe. She hesitated, glancing back as shadows shifted among the trees. The growl had transformed, becoming something more sinister, more persistent, ripping through the fabric of night. She ducked behind an ancient oak, her pulse hammering. The officer's figure appeared in the muddled light, searching, hunting. His face was set, a dark mask marred by the faintest trace of anger. "Come out, Karen," he called sweetly, the voice chilling her blood. It's not safe for you to be out here. You can't run forever. Gritting her teeth, Karen fought the instinct to bolt. She needed to think. The cabin might hold answers, a means of escape. If she could make it there before he closed in. Slowly, she edged toward the light, cautious, every nerve and instinct on high alert. Shadows lunged and retreated like a predator testing its prey. With every inch gained, her heart whispered promises of deliverance and warning. As she reached the porch, dread seeped in. The door stood slightly ajar, creaking with a gentle sway, welcoming her into the unknown. She hesitated again. Was this place really a sanctuary, or an open mouth ready to devour her whole? Then a voice, low and rough, emerged from within. "Help me!" It was a desperate croak that tugged at her empathy. A man, slumped near the fireplace, his eyes wild, drenched in fear. "He's coming for you too. You have to leave. He doesn't stop." And there it was, the truth lingering in the air, sharp and cruel. The officer wasn't just targeting her. He was a hunter in a game with no mercy. A howl echoed from the woods, cutting through the quiet, primal and powerful. "Get in," she yelled, but the man just shook his head, eyes widening as he seemed to catch sight of something behind her. Before she could turn, darkness erupted around her. The officer was no longer a distant figure. He was here, looming, a predator with a wicked grin. "Playing games, are we?" he sneered, raising an ominous flashlight that sliced through the night like a blade. The growl intensified, closer now, a snarling promise that brought her back to reality. Karen's mind spun. Should she confront him, or trust the stranger? The cabin's door seemed less inviting now, more like jaws ready to close on whoever stepped inside. With the hunter on her tail and another threat lurking, she was caught between darkness and a flickering hope. An impossible choice loomed in the air: the officer or the stranger. Either path could lead to salvation or doom. "Choose wisely, Karen," he taunted, the tension palpable, each heartbeat a countdown. But time was running out. What had begun as a simple drive had spiraled into an abyss of horror. And deep down, she knew survival meant confronting the darkest parts of herself. As the officer took a step forward, shadows danced erratically behind him, and Karen's fear ignited into determination. But which way would she turn? Would she confront the officer's bloodthirsty gaze, or embrace the unknown within the cabin's dim glow? The moment hung, heavy in the air, electric with possibility. What would she choose? What price was she willing to pay to survive? Karen's breath quickened as her mind raced through possibilities. The officer's eyes glittered like shards of glass, cold and calculating. What's it going to be? Huh? The cabin or me? Tick-tock. He waved the flashlight like a wand, illuminating the trees where hints of movement suggested something was lurking just beyond the radius of his beam. Her instincts screamed for her to bolt into the cabin. The stranger's desperate eyes urged her to act. "Get in. Trust me," he gasped, his voice thick with urgency. The growl resonated through the night, more vicious now, a growl she could feel in her bones. Every moment stretched. The air crackled with tension. She hesitated, trapped between two terrifying worlds, a hunter and the unknown. "You know the truth, Karen. It's time to stop running." The officer's voice slithered into her mind, a dark lullaby challenging her will to fight. "Shut up," she shouted, grounding herself. Anger coursed through her. "I'm not afraid of you." The officer laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees. "Fear is in your blood, sweetheart, and the woods are hungry tonight." He shifted his weight, seeming to grow larger under the faint light, a beast eager to shed its human skin. She took a step towards the cabin, guilt twisting her stomach. Could she really trust the stranger? What if he was simply bait for the officer? The man in the cabin seemed to sense her turmoil and nodded desperately, as if reading her thoughts. "Please, please," he pleaded, his eyes darting from her to the officer. "He'll kill you. You have to choose now." A branch cracked nearby, pulling her attention. The growl grew louder, more menacing. Her pulse raced. Right now, she couldn't afford to hesitate. No more doubt. With a sudden surge, she spun and lunged into the cabin with all her might. The warmth of the fire flickered as she stumbled over a worn rug, gasping. "Lock it!" The man cried, urgency tearing at his words. She slammed the door shut, heart hammering in her chest as she fumbled with the latch, her blood roaring in her ears. The cabin felt smaller now, its interior saturated with shadows. Glancing back, she saw the dim outline of the stranger, now standing. His features were barely illuminated by the dying firelight, and Karen's fear returned, his expression twisted, mouth thin and tight with strain. "What are you hiding from?" she managed to say, her voice trembling. "You know what he is, don't you?" He nodded, sweat glistening on his forehead. "He*s worse than you can imagine. He's south part of this place." Her breath caught as realization settled. "You mean the woods they're alive?" An echo of laughter from outside rattled her bones. "A part of him," the man responded, desperation creeping into his words. "It's not just him hunting. It's the darkness of the woods, it's awake." The laughter outside dropped into a deep growl, the trees creaking around them like a symphony of terror. Karen felt the breath of primal fear clawing up her throat. "What does it want?" she whispered, but the man just shook his head, eyes wide with something she couldn't place. Their lives hung in a fragile balance, and as the growl intensified, the door rattled like something eager to break free. A chilling thought struck her. Was it just the officer who hunted? "Karen, we need to get out of here. There's nowhere safe," he urged, but his voice wavered. The shadows crept closer, filling the corners of the cabin, whispering secrets in a language of dread. What had begun as horror in the woods now became a frantic decision spiraling deeper into darkness. "Stay close to me," she warned, heart racing again, less from fear of the officer and more from the mystery unraveling before her. Who was he? And what awaited outside those walls? The door shook violently, and the laughter turned to an anguished howl that rattled her very bones. With the threat closing in and her mind swirling with questions, she felt the manifestation of terror shift again. Shadows seemed to close in, ready to wrap around them. What was she truly facing? And was the true horror already inside the cabin with her? The door splintered slightly, and Karen's breath hitched. This battle was only just beginning. Karen pressed her back against the cold, wooden door, instinctively binding herself to the small space around her. The familiar backdrop of fire crackling weakly was swallowed by a menacing energy, whispering from every corner like a predator waiting to pounce. "Is there a way out?" she whispered breathlessly, glancing at the stranger, his face twisted with anxiety. "No," he replied, shaking his head. "Not unless we can get past him. He won't stop until he feeds." "Feeds?" A chill blanketed her spine, and she trembled despite the heat of the fire. What does that even mean? He didn't respond. Instead, he took a step toward the window, peering through the gaps in the shutters. "We have to stay quiet," he warned, voice barely a whisper. "He can hear everything." He's been hunting for a long time. A loud thud reverberated against the door, forcing her heart into her throat. "What is it?" she urged, her voice quaking. "Not just him. The woods," he spat out, fear curling his features. "They know you're here now." The sound of scratching claws began as a distant whisper, then crescendoed into a sickening symphony against the wood. It was like nails running along glass, each scrape announcing the arrival of impending doom. "Why are you a part of this?" she demanded, a swell of defiance rising within her. "If you know everything, why didn't you warn me sooner?" He hesitated, the shame eating away at him like acid. "I thought I could escape it. I thought I could keep you safe, but it doesn't work like that. It wants us to suffer." The shadows thickened around them, as if the darkness outside was reclaiming the light. It loomed closer, squeezing the air out of the cabin. Everything felt suffocating, alive yet malignant. "I'm going to find a way out of this," Karen asserted, firing up her courage. "There has to be something we can do." His gaze darted back toward the door as it rattled again, this time with a force that resonated through her bones. She could feel the malicious presence connecting with her, winding tighter. "Stop! You'll draw his attention," he hissed, grabbing her wrist. We need to think. Think? She snarled, her panic morphing into desperation. Yes, right outside. I can't just wait for him to break in. Outside, a low growl rumbled through the dark, one she finally recognized. It wasn't just a sound. It was a voice, hungry for something primal. Russ, the officer, was not alone. I can't stay here, she screamed, battling against the instinct to bolt. No, he cried, but her body already had other plans. Adrenaline surged through her, and she charged for the window. Karen, don't, he shouted, lunging to stop her. With a brutal crash, something smashed into the door, slamming her back against the wooden frame. Winded, as she gasped for breath, the door splintered, the light flickering like a candle in a storm. She looked towards the stranger, his face turning pale, eyes wide, reflecting terror. What if it's true? He whispered hoarsely. What if it wants us both? Before she could respond, the darkness writhed outside, swirling into shapes that felt alive, drawing closer. The air smelled of decay, of something ancient and hungry. Whatever you do, he warned, his voice barely above a whisper, don't look into the woods. But it was too late. A flicker of motion danced just beyond the shards of light, eyes glimmering, shapes writhing, the forest reaching into the cabin like skeletal fingers. The door screamed in protest as the being outside forced its way against it, pushing against the fragile wood like a force of nature. And in that moment, all semblance of safety shattered. Karen's eyes flew wide, and as dread gripped her heart, terror consumed her thoughts. Could they possibly make it through? Or would they feed the darkness lurking outside? She felt it crash into the door, shattering her resolve. An escape seemed impossible. Then, in the briefest second of clarity, a voice echoed from the depths of the shadows. Leave her be. Karen's breath caught. No, that voice. It was familiar. And suddenly, the abominable truth loomed before her. Someone she never expected was entwined in this web of horror. The forest knew her name, and now it wanted to claim her. Was there a way out, or had she finally walked into her nightmare? The door bowed under the weight of the darkness outside, creaking as if it were about to give in. Karen's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out her thoughts. She could still hear that ominous voice, speaking her name, an echo etched into her very being. Who was that? She gasped, searching the stranger's face for answers. It's him, he stuttered, fear pooling in his eyes. He knows you. A violent shove rattled the door again, and splinters flew as it cracked further. There was palpable rage on the other side. Karen backed away, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet she was frozen. What does he want? Your fear, your pain. It feeds him, he murmured, backing toward the fireplace, the flickering light casting unsettling shadows on his face. Suddenly, something dark and slick slipped through the door's widening crack, long, thin fingers clawing at the splintered wood. The stranger let out a strangled gasp as he stumbled backward. Leave now, he yelled, desperation lacing his words. Don't let it take you. Karen's muscles surged with adrenaline, and she surged forward but found herself torn between the dark swirling shapes creeping through the door and the stranger's pleading eyes. The cabin's warmth was now a pit of cold dread, snaking into her bones. I can't go back, she screamed, feeling the rage swell in her chest. You're not the only one trapped here. Stay away from the window, he howled, pointing as the darkness twisted outside, an amorphous mass looming closer. With a sudden spark of clarity, Karen dashed to the window, ripping the shutters open. The moment the light spilled out, faces appeared in the trees, hollow eyes filled with longing, mouths twisted in delight. The woods weren't just alive. They were hungry. A chorus of whispers filled the air, scraping against her like knives. Join us, they beckoned. Feed the forest. No, she screamed, shaking her head violently. I want tea. Impulse took hold, and she grabbed a broken log from the fireplace, brandishing it like a weapon. The stranger shouted a warning, but it was drowned amidst the cacophony of howls and growls, a maddening symphony of the damned. The door splintered, and in a heartbeat, it burst open. The figure charged through half seen in the flickering light, a grotesque silhouette. It was tall, patchy skin stretched over a skeletal frame, eyes gleaming with insatiable hunger. Lean limbs reached out, grasping, desperate to snatch her away. "Run!" the stranger bellowed, pushing Karen toward the dark hallway behind them. Yet she hesitated, torn, caught between two worlds. But she heard the wood creak, the unnatural sound of something heavy moving. She couldn't stay. Not anymore. With a fierce scream, she sprinted away down the hall, the stranger close behind. The cabin creaked and groaned as if it were alive, walls trembling ominously around them. Light flickered, shadows stretching as they ran deeper into the gloom. "Do you know where we're going?" he shouted, dread creeping into his voice. "There has to be a back door," she yelled, searching the indiscernible shapes around them. But with every step, the darkness breathed down her neck, wrapping around her body like a cold hand. Another roar echoed from the hallway, causing her to stumble. "It's coming!" They darted into an unseen room, the door slamming shut behind them. It was an old storage room, filled with dust-covered tools and forgotten relics. She could hear heavy breaths from the grasp of chaos lurking outside. "We can't stay here," he panted, hands on his knees. "Then what? We let it claim us?" The wood groaned, the door rattling again. Voices from beyond whispered, laced with mockery. "You can't escape, you cannot hide." A realization hit Karen. "If it wants my fear, maybe, just maybe, we can make it leave us alone." She grabbed the stranger's arms, forcing him to look into her eyes. "We can't let it feed. We have to confront it." "Are you insane?" He pulled back, panic etched on his face. "It's a monster, maybe it's time we feed it something else," she said, a plan forming within her racing thoughts. Before he could protest, she turned toward the door, clay-like shadows swirling under the crack. "Either they face it or they let it win. Trust me," she shouted, swinging open the door, and the darkness surged forward, a howling mass ready to consume them. But what if confronting it unleashed something they weren't prepared for? As the darkness enveloped them, Karen felt a cold dread wash over her. Would they break the cycle, or would they lose themselves in the relentless hunt? The door exploded open, and shadows rushed in like a torrent, overwhelming them in an icy grip. Karen felt the air siphon from her lungs, claustrophobia creeping as the void filled the room, swallowing any remnants of light. "Karen!" the stranger screamed, but his voice was lost within the howling chaos. She twisted back, ready to dive into the dark when the shadows seized him, dragging him backward. His eyes were wide, filled with panic and betrayal, as the blackness swallowed him whole. "No!" she shrieked, diving forward, but her arms clawed at nothing. The dark mass undulated and pulsed, revealing glimmers of flesh twisted into horrific forms, faces echoing her distress with silent screams. She wrestled with despair and fury. "What do you want from me?" she screamed into the void, heart pounding furiously against her ribs. The shadows twisted in response, as if considering her question. "Join us," came the haunting echoes, a chorus that resonated deep within her bones. "You are one of us, no," she cried, shaking her head violently, battling against whatever grip they sought to ensnare her with. "I am not like you." And then came an electric surge of anger from deep within, pushing aside the consuming fear, igniting a fire in her chest. "You're nothing but a coward," she bellowed, the words escaping before she could stop them. "You thrive on our fear, but I won't give you that power." The mass recoiled as if struck. For a fleeting moment, the chaos wavered, allowing a sliver of light to pierce through. She darted toward it, her feet pounding against the wooden floor, desperately seeking escape. But the shadows writhed, lashing out with monstrous limbs, swiping at her with unnatural speed. The tendrils grazed her skin, sending a shock of frost through her veins. She stumbled, falling to her knees, feeling small and exposed beneath their relentless assault. "Find the light," whispered a voice from somewhere deep inside her. She remembered the power of the silvered moon that had once filled her heart with courage. She fished into her pocket, retrieving a scratched old mirror she had kept throughout the years. "Come on," she shouted, holding the mirror up like a shield. "You can't take me." The moment the light glinted off its surface, the shadows hissed, trying to retreat, coiling back as if scorched by a flame. Karen crawled forward, pushing the mirror harder into the darkness, eyes wide with adrenaline. "Leave me alone," she cried again, her voice an echo of newfound strength. The shadows writhed frantically, a desperate creature struggling against a fire it could not extinguish. Then she saw him, the stranger, his face a mask of fear. "Help!" he pleaded, from somewhere in the encroaching dark, panic gripping every syllable. The shadows twisted tighter around him, feeding off his terror like a parched earth thirsting for rain. "I won't let you feed on him," she yelled, heart racing. "I'll save you." With a surge of resolve, she charged at the tendrils gripping him, wielding the mirror like a sword. The moment the reflective surface caught the tendrils, they screamed, retreating further into the dark. "Keep going," Karen urged herself, gaining momentum as she swept the mirror through the swirling blackness. She could feel its tight grip loosening, no longer able to hold its form. Then, suddenly, the darkness exploded. Spectrums of color erupted from the mirror. A blinding light washed over them, revealing what lay hidden beneath the shadows. Ghoulish forms with distorted faces, eyes filled with angry longing, crumbled away into ash. The cabin filled with a searing warmth, driving out the last remnants of night. Yet, in the unfolding victory, something flickered on the edge of her consciousness, a deeper shadow hiding. Waiting for the moment of vulnerability, Karen turned back to the stranger, breathless and desperate. "Are you okay? Can you move?" But he desperately shook his head, his gaze fixated behind her, eyes wide with terror. "Karen, it's not over." A chill clawed up her spine as she turned slowly, aware of the air thickening around her, the faint whispers, returning, now more insistent. The hunger wasn't gone. No, it lingered. "What do you mean?" she asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "Just run," he urged again, but it was too late. The shadows were regaining strength, the darkness reconstituting itself, gathering in a mass that loomed larger than before. As she backed away, the familiar voice echoed once more, the very essence of her fear wrapping around her like a vice. "Join us," but she felt something else, an undercurrent of ice-cold fury surging within. Could she fight it again? The moment hung in the balance. Would she risk everything she had grown to regain? With the darkness creeping forward, ready to claim them once more, Karen had to decide. Would she give in, or would she again stand ready to battle the haunting depths? What was lurking deeper in the darkness? And at what cost would courage come to reclaim her hope? The shadows surged, a black tide rising higher, snarling and curling like living smoke around her. Karen felt the cold breath of their despair wash over her, paralyzing her limbs with fear. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet felt cemented to the floor as the whispers of the darkness filled her head. "Join us now," she yelled, her voice cracking, each word coming out like a challenge. She gripped the mirror tighter, its surface warming against her palm, a beacon against the encroaching gloom. "Join us," the voice twisted through her mind like barbed wire, stinging with the promises of power and security. "You can have everything you desire," but with every syllable, the heat of her defiance flared brighter. "I'd rather die than be one of you," she screamed, dragging her gaze away from the depths threatening to pull her in. The stranger, he needed her. He was still trapped. She turned to him, heart racing. "I'll get you out." But uncertainty flickered in his eyes, the shadows shrouding him like a mourning veil. As she raised the mirror, a burst of courage surged within. "You don't control me," she shouted, thrusting it toward the shadowy mass. A brilliant flash of light erupted, sending the shadows recoiling, howling in pain. But as the light cast away some darkness, it also revealed something worse. Karen froze at the sight, lurking behind the shroud, the true face of the malevolence that hunted them. A figure emerged, blacker than the night itself, twisted, gigantic, with gnarled limbs stretching out like claws, eyes burning with insatiable hunger. Come to me, it growled, its voice a growl like gravel scraping over stone. Karen's heart raced as dread clawed at her. This wasn't just darkness, it was a predator, feeding off their fear and despair. She backed away, instinct demanding her legs to run, but the mirror trembled in her grasp. The balance was shifting. The warmth of her earlier victory felt distant now. Stay in the light. It can't touch you, she reminded herself, pushing toward the stranger, hoping he would follow. He remained still, transfixed by the nightmare manifesting before them. Come, it beckoned, its voice a low rumble, echoing through the cabin, drawing closer. You will be free, join me. She could see in his eyes the struggle between fear and the allure of safety disguised in dark promises. No, she shouted again, urgency spilling into her pleas. It lies. Don't you see what it is? But the shadows were relentless, creeping toward him, tendrils snaking around his legs, tightening like a serpent's grip. Karen, he cried out, his voice cracking under the pressure of his rising terror. Help me. Fight it, she urged, feeling the power of her own resolve rise up from within. You have to fight. Suddenly, the mass surged forward, a wave of nothingness crashing down upon them. She swung the mirror, illuminating the space around them. For a moment, light reigned, but only for a heartbeat before the shadows lunged, clawing at her once more, howling in defiance. The darkness roared, wrapping around her, binding her, pulling her into the void. Karen bit her lip, feeling the sting of its icy fingers inching up her spine. Not again, she whispered. With every ounce of her strength, she screamed. Get out. Up. The mirror flashed again, and a fierce light erupted, forcing the shadows to retreat, but it was growing weak. Desperation clawed at her throat. She could feel the drain of her energy as the shadows loomed larger and hungrier, their whispers turning into a cacophony. Join us, they chanted, pulling her even closer. Fight, she roared at herself, but doubt crept in. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if this time the darkness claimed her? Karen felt her will waning. Panic surged as she saw the stranger slumped against the wall where shadows coiled around his body, feeding off his dread. She couldn't lose him, not now. Taking a breath, she steadied her shaking fingers on the mirror and recalled that rekindled fire deep within herself. With one last push, she charged forward, unleashing a blinding flare of light. The shadows recoiled, but the darkness was relentless. She had one last chance. Together, she called, reaching out to the stranger, desperation flooding her voice. At that moment, shadows crawled back, but they didn't retreat completely. No, they watched, waiting, as if testing their prey's resolve. Would they finally break her spirit? Would they seize this moment of doubt to pull her back into their eternal night? Karen plunged forward, heart racing as the shadows reached for her. What was she willing to sacrifice to save them both? And who was really the predator in this twisted game? Karen felt the air thicken as the shadows lurked, their whispers drowning her thoughts. The light from the mirror flickered, barely holding back the encroaching darkness. She had to push forward, needed to save both herself and the stranger. Please, she shouted, reaching for him. His eyes, once filled with terror, now sparked with an almost desperate hope. Take my hand, she cried, feeling the tendrils of darkness nibble at her ankles. He hesitated, caught in the web of fear that tightened around him, nearly suffocating. She felt the pull of despair from the stranger. It was irresistible, a sickening lure that sought to drain her strength completely. Fight it. I know you can. The darkness writhed around her, a living entity pulsating with hunger. The ghastly figure loomed overhead, each jagged limb reaching for her with the promise of a violence unbound. Don't let it take you, Karen shouted. Suddenly the mirror pulsed. A surge of heat flowed through her, fed by her determination and the connection she fought to forge with the stranger. She needed him to believe that there was still hope. You don't have to succumb. We're stronger together. His hand reached out. The moment their fingers brushed, she felt an electric jolt, a spark against the chilling grip of the shadows. The light grew, intensifying as they grasped tighter. She flung the mirror toward the darkness, the light expanding like a glittering star cutting through a blackened sky. Yet, the shadows screamed. A cacophony of anguish and rage reverberated against the cabin's walls. With a defiant roar, they lunged, seeking to engulf them in bitter oblivion. Karen felt the vibration of their wrath deep in her chest, threatening to suffocate the flicker of hope. "Fight!" she yelled again, as the weight of shadows strained against their fragile union. Just as the darkness surged forward, she turned her gaze to the stranger, finding strength in his ferocity. "Together," he repeated, gathering the last remnants of his will. The combined power of their spirits shone like a beacon, and in that moment, the mirror blazed with an unholy light. The figure behind them howled as the darkness clawed at the fortress of illumination they had created. But then, disbelief washed over her. "It's not just about us," she realized. The malevolent presence shifted. Its glowing eyes locked onto the mirror, its hunger morphing. It sensed their resistance, but now it sought to twist that very strength against them. Suddenly, a horrifying vision flashed through Karen's mind. What if the shadows could turn their bond into a weapon? "It's trying to divide us," she shouted, panic breaking through the defiance. She could feel the stranger's resolve beginning to waver under the weight of overwhelming darkness. She couldn't let it win. With every last ounce of determination, she held the mirror up high, pouring what little power remained into it. "Look at me. We cannot let it tear us apart." The shadows hissed in frustration, momentarily retreating as the light forced them back. But the reprieve was short-lived. Quietly creeping, tendrils of darkness pooled around their feet, an insidious reminder of what awaited them if they failed. "Don't look away. Keep your focus." She could feel the cold seep into her very bones, wrestling with the warmth of their union. The shadows strained and snapped, desperate to reclaim their prey. Together the stranger breathed, his voice barely audible. He was faltering, she could feel it. A pang of terror ripped through her heart. If they lost this moment, if doubt clouded their bond, they would be consumed. A jolt of energy pulsed through her, igniting a defiant flame. "Now!" she screamed, thrusting the mirror forward. Both their hands joined tight around it. The radiant light exploded outward, enveloping them in a divine glow that shook with power. But as the light surged, the shadows wrapped tighter around their shoulders, their claws grazing skin, drawing blood. "Karen!" he yelled, the pain evident in his voice. She felt the darkness clawing at her neck, icy fingers wrapping around her throat. For one last defiant moment, she shouted over the howling darkness, "We're not alone." Just then, the light flickered violently, and Karen's heart sank as the shadows erupted forward, engulfing all she held dear. Returning the light meant surrendering something else, but what would it cost? Questions flooded her mind as the darkness gripped her, merging her life and the stranger's into one terrifying dance of destruction. How long could she fight? How deep would she go to save them both? And at what price? She felt the darkness lick at her skin, a storm brewing within and beyond. What terrible choice lay ahead? Would she dare confront the unspeakable truths waiting in the shadow? Karen stumbled, her breath catching in her throat as the shadows twisted around her. A chilling tide ready to drown her hope. The darkness felt heavier now, almost sentient, wrapping around her limbs and clawing at her spirit. "I won't let you take me," she growled, driving her fists into the encroaching void. The mirror pulsed with life, a precious ember fighting against a consuming inferno. The stranger's eyes shone with a mingled fear and determination, and Karen felt the strength in his gaze. In that fragile moment, they were two beings intertwined against a haunting abyss. "We have to press on," she exclaimed, urging him to hold tight to their moment of clarity. "Together we'll break its hold." He nodded, accepting her fierce declaration, and they raised the mirror higher, the light piercing the shadows with a brilliance that pushed back the darkness retreating from its rays. "It's feeding on our fear," she realized, the mask of terror slipping slightly from her heart. If they could confront their dread, they might end this nightmare clip with a steely resolve. Karen took a deep breath, channeling every ounce of power she had. What if we turn the fear back on it? What if we claim our strength? She squeezed the stranger's hand, their bond glowing like a lifeline against the dark, the whispers becoming an angry murmur. Let it come, she said defiantly. We own this light. It can't touch us if we fight back. The shadows snarled, a dark sea roiling around them as tendrils of darkness lunged forward in a frenzied attack. Karen stood firm, holding the mirror aloft, firing back waves of brimming light. Each burst felt like a heartbeat of defiance against the nightmare threatening to consume them whole. The monstrous figure, colossal and twisted, snaked closer, mouth twisted into a grotesque mockery of a grin as it sensed their determination. Join me, it hissed, urging them with a voice as velvety as silk yet laced with despair. You can't win, no, Karen cried. Join you? I'll never let you claim me. The light thrummed, amplifying her words, weaving through the darkness like threads of gold. She pushed against the suffocating gloom, letting her fear morph into fuel for their newfound strength. Suddenly, the stranger pulled the mirror closer to his heart, looking deep into its reflecting surface. You must confront it. What it wants us divided. His voice faltered slightly, filled with desperation. We can't allow it. The shadows wrapped even tighter, but she could feel the warmth of their joined spirits, that spark of hope growing brighter against the night. Together, she screamed, and with one powerful surge, they flung the mirror at the figure, the shattered darkness scattering beneath the blinding light. Light exploded through the cabin, spiraling outward and embedding itself deep into the heart of the shadows, burning hot. No! Came the anguished roar, a sound like the cracking of thunder, the darkness squirming helplessly as it fought against both itself and the light. But Karen was steady, her heart thrumming in unison with the pulse of the light. You don't own us, she shouted, pulling strength from every inch of resilience she could muster. Fear tore at her insides, but this time it was different. She fueled the fire with her defiance, igniting against the shadows clinging greedily to their lives. Bursts of light shot forth, cracking against the dark figures, luminescent walls expanding like a beacon through the cabin. She lunged forward again, fists clenched around the mirror, plunging into the core of the shadows, feeling the shift as the darkness recoiled with rage. Take that, she screamed, the sound echoing in the storm of chaos, reverberating back through the woods like a thunderous declaration. Then, silence. The stillness enveloped them like a soft embrace, the darkness ebbing away in tendrils of rambling smoke. The last whispers dissipated, vanishing into nothing. As the blinding brilliance faded, the cabin stood still. The stranger turned to her, his expression shifting from horror to awe. They were no longer surrounded by malice, and the oppressive aura of the woods felt lighter, almost liberated. But the victory was bittersweet. The darkness, while quelled, was never far behind. There would always be shadows lurking, with breathless glee. Karen fell to her knees and wept, overwhelmed by the relief flooding through her. We did it, we confronted it together. Yeah, the stranger replied, his voice hoarse. But we need to keep moving. There's no telling when the darkness will return. She nodded, wiping her tears and pushing herself off the ground. The woods were alive with unfamiliar sounds. But this time, she was ready. The fear that once threatened to consume her now stoked the flickering flame of her courage as they stepped back into the uncertainty of the night. Shadows danced in the periphery, always watching, always waiting. But now, with each passing step and the bond they forged, Karen felt stronger. She would no longer let the darkness dictate her fate. They would face whatever lay ahead together, with their hearts anew. And something inside her whispered, "You're not alone anymore. If you loved this finale, you need to subscribe now. Don't miss out on exclusive stories waiting for you to experience. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm so others can join our ride. Flood the comments section with your reactions and wild theories on what awaits next. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need a good chill. This is the moment to show your support for the channel.